this webinar is designed for our Leadership Academy students. So welcome Leadership Academy students, but of course we have opened it up to anybody who is interested in the topic. Just to give everybody a little bit of a high level overview of who we are, what Safe Project is, and why we're here. I know some people are very familiar, but I also know some people who registered for this webinar are not familiar. So Safe Project is a national nonprofit. We were started in late 2017 by Admiral Sandy Wednefeld and his wife, Mary, following the death of their son during his first week of college. Safe Project stands for Stop the Addiction Fatality Epidemic. And at the core of everything we do is we want to save lives. And we do that through 4 main initiatives, which I'm actually not going to get into right now. I'm going to share the link to our website in the chat box. And I really encourage you to hop on to our website and just learn a little bit more about all 4 of our initiatives. But tonight we are here on behalf of our Safe Campuses initiative. And what we do on Safe Campuses is we want to make recovery accessible to everyone. And that means making it accessible to those who are in recovery, who are using drugs, and who might find recovery when they're in college. So we do that through a variety of ways. We do that through working with staff and administrators. And we also do that by working with students. And that is where we land with our Leadership Academy. So each year we welcome about 50 students in recovery, as well as some recovery allies from around the country, all over different campuses. And they join a leadership program, and we host some really awesome leadership development events in person. During COVID, they were not in person. We're super excited that they did move back to in person this year. We host these webinars for our Leadership Academy students, and there's some additional mentorship and peer mentorship as well included in that program. So I'm gonna include some links to all of that in the chat box. I really encourage new folks to take a look at some of those programs. But right now I want to make sure that we get everybody else introduced. So Matt, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Thanks, Hannah. My name is Matthew Patterson. I am a person in long-term recovery. I was a graduate of last year's cohort for the Collegiate Recovery Leadership Academy, and I am now working part-time for Safe Project as their student voice liaison, helping facilitate the projects this year and help the students this year. I'm also a Master of Social Work student at Florida Atlantic University, and I should graduate this May. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. All right, well, we're going to jump right in. There's going to be plenty of time for questions at the end. So feel free, as Ron is sharing some information and going over his presentation, feel free to start putting questions in the actual Q&A box down at the bottom. We will be doing our best to keep a hold of the chat box, but if you all have attended Zoom webinars before, those questions can kind of get lost throughout the presentation. So the best way to make sure that your question gets answered towards the end is to put it in the actual chat box. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ron. Ron is one of our good friends at Safe Project. He is currently a consultant for the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. And he's also a former NYPD law enforcement professional. So he brings a really unique perspective to the topic that we're talking about tonight. So Ron, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I am absolutely honored to be here this evening. And I'm going to be talking to you tonight about something called harm reduction. And more importantly, in some instances, how harm reduction can be used as a tool to combat overdoses in a college campus community. I'm thankful for that short introduction, because I like to tell people oftentimes that it's more important not to have the words that people use to define who you are, but be defined by what you do. So a lot of this conversation is going to pertain to just overall personal empowerment and how we can basically create a greater definition for ourselves, one that we love about ourselves and we feel good about ourselves. This conversation is going to be very, very informal. I'm going to get to the nit and gritty of what harm reduction is, or what has come to mean to me and people that I work with. I'm currently working as a board member and as a consultant with the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. We've done numerous things as far as pertaining to like just overall outreach, administering naloxone Narcan for multiple communities and acquiring for multiple agencies, including law enforcement agencies, doing everything involved with distribution of fentanyl strips to the like, but allow me to like just kind of like just get to that first before I really just get into all of that. I am a very anecdotal person, so you're going to hear things that are a little bit off base, a little bit unfiltered, a little bit different to some degree, because basically this is the way in which I communicate. So there'll be no slides, there'll be nothing for you to look at. Really, all you need to do is kind of like just hear the essence of a message that I'm basically trying to convey. I want to start with basically what would be the, I guess technically the 5 W's of what everything is going on right now. So we could say, well, why am I here? What do I do? Where is this all taking place at? When is it going on? And I'm going to try to answer all of these questions and finalize everything with who. And the who more so pertains to you. It may pertain to me. It's going to pertain to anybody that's marginalized, impacted, or with lived experience that basically can connect to this conversation. But I want to start basically, if you will allow me, and I want to read for a second the lyrics of a song. Now, this was from a off-Broadway play that originated in the 1990s in New York City. It was about an area in Lower Manhattan, which is called the East Village, and the Broadway show was called Rent. And the lyrics to the song is from a song called Seasons of Love. The lyrics go 525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear, 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights and sunsets, in midnights and cups of coffee, in inches and miles, in laughter and strife. In 525,600 minutes, how do you measure a year in a life? What do? I talk about different ways in which we can create opportunities and pathways, be it if they may be alternative, as a means of saving people's lives. Over the last 12-month calendar period, 100,000 people died as a result of overdose deaths, be it opioids or psychostimulants. Now, these numbers, when we look back into 2020 numbers, which is actually now a full year behind, but stats tend to drag a little bit behind, we can look at things like COVID-19 and social isolation and how various programs like harm reduction and social cycle assessment programs were stunted and they weren't available for people to attend. And needless to say, treatment options were limited. And I think one of the contributing factors, also different numbers is we need to look at an emergence of basically how we need to treat ourselves as far as personal well-being, mental wellness, and emergence of mental health crisis and behavioral health crises through our country. So the question revolves back to like, well, what is it that I do? Well, my belief is that we have a country that just looks at or looks through a particular lens the way in which recovery or treatment options needs to be administered. So basically the question is, well, how can we change thinking? How can we culturally present ourselves in a different way where we can get people to now say, let's move forward in a little bit of a different way? It doesn't have to be anything drastic, but something that just gives people an alternative pathway, a different opportunity to move forward. I oftentimes talk about a science fiction hero of mine. His name is James Tiberius Kirk. He's from the science fiction show called Star Trek. It was a series that originated back in the 60s, but since then it's produced multiple series, multiple storylines, animated movies, other television series, all primarily because of the strength of this one character named James Kirk. Kirk went to a place called the Starfleet Academy, and in that Starfleet Academy, he had to take an exam. And this exam was called the Kobayashi Maru. It was a test that was specifically designed for candidates to fail the exam. In other words, basically, candidates weren't supposed to pass it. The objective of the test was to see what type of integrity you had in the moment where you basically fail an exam. You can't pass. There's a no-win scenario. Kirk took the test once, he failed. He took the test a second time, he failed. Upon taking the test the third time, Kirk decided, I'm not built this particular way. I don't fail like this. Kirk basically went in the night before into the computer room, changed the parameters of the exam, and then the next day, he passed the exam. He was applauded because he showed inspiration and ingenuity to pass the exam, but he was also reprimanded for the fact that he cheated. He cheated in order to do this. But the purpose of the cheat was to say, in order to get a different result, I need to be willing to do things differently. Different result, do things differently. Let's put this in a little bit of a historical context, but I want you to remember basically the essence of what the Kobayashi Maru is. Can we get a different result and get a winning scenario if we do things differently? 1971, President Nixon received a memo across his desk stating that 15% of returning veterans coming back from the Vietnam War were suffering from some type of substance use disorder. At this particular moment, he commenced what we now refer to as the war on drugs. Every form of forfeitures and confiscation and arrest and incarceration of people that distribute, sell, possess, or use any type of narcotic substance. 50 years would be an easy way of basically defining what that time period looks like. But the real truth about it is what 50 years is a half a century. Now, what this overall consensus is that we've engaged in a half a century of something that has ultimately failed. It's failed because the consensus opinion is now that we will not be able to arrest our way out of any type of substance use disorder problem, which means that what we're now setting ourselves up for on a societal level is people saying, are we open to a Kobayashi Maru? Are we open to a paradigm shift? Are we open to any type of scenario where we can now do things differently to get a different result? Hence, we enter in with this thing called harm reduction. Now, here's what I can tell you about harm reduction before even getting into a definition of it. It is currently one of the most appropriated, co-signed, co-opted phrases, terms that's being used throughout the country by either public health agencies, nonprofit agencies, agencies for the prevention of HIV/AIDS, hepatitis C. Harm reduction is in the middle of everything that is governmentally or from a benevolent society, people providing funds, monies, or whatever to basically promote harm reduction measures. Why? Well, partially because it's a part of that paradigm shift. The other part of it is it's new, but it's not new. It's been here for a very, very long time. All right. So the question is, well, what is harm reduction? In its barest sense, what would harm reduction be as a definition? Well, typically I keep it very, very simple. And I say harm reduction is simply that of reducing harm, which means technically I can make an argument that when someone gets in a car and they drive in a car and they put their seatbelt on, at that moment, they're being a harm reductionist. Harm reduction involves basically applying evidence-based practices or scientifically proven measures as a means of mitigating risk and reducing negative consequences, which means that when you put the seatbelt on, it's evidence-based, you're mitigating risk. So when we look at other things and basically say, or as an alternative factor, if I was to be a tremendous litigator and say, well, I want to produce some legislation where basically there'll be no sexual intercourse anywhere in our country, ever, ever, ever again. Doesn't seem very likely that that piece of law, that statute would pass. But the real truth about it is if I said, well, let's create a campaign where we're using more condom distribution as a means of preventing something like the spread of hepatitis C or HIV or any type of sexually transmitted diseases, then theoretically it may be taken a little bit differently. Once again, evidence-based practices as a means of mitigating risk. Now, the sole objective of this is to prevent disease and to promote good health. Now, this is where harm reduction tends to differ a little bit with everyone. I work with a lot of people that are involved in injection drug use, which means that occasionally I can see people on the street that has wounds and abscess on their arm or throughout their body. Now, from a medical perspective, if these wounds and these abscesses aren't taken care of, it can lead to something called endocarditis, which is an inflammation of heart valves. So I may go up to that particular individual and I can do the old school way of thinking, saying, hey, listen, John, I see you out here in this particular corner. You're creating problems for yourself. I don't know why you have to use that smack. It's not doing anything good for you. You're going to lose your loved ones. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose everyone that you care about because you can't stop doing that. Listen, I live here in North Carolina in a county that's got wonderful treatment options. And I think you need to find some willpower, suck it up, come down here and get this thing done. Guys, let me tell you something. One thing that all data is showing right now that we can statistically show is that compelling someone, mandating someone for treatment options, statistically is a low rate of recovery and a high rate of relapse. It's not a viable means of sustainable means of saying we can move forward and do things this way. Do some people continue to move forward along that path? Absolutely. But data supports that ultimately we need people to be at a point of readiness. Readiness just simply means that where the mind has basically reached the point where it says, hey, look, this is the directional course that I want to go. What harm reduction does is it takes that information and holds it as being paramount of saying, I'm not going to mandate, I'm not going to compel. In fact, I am not going to require abstinence. The only thing that I want to do is I want to be like a doctor on a television show on NBC called New Amsterdam. And his number one line is how can I help you? In other words, how can I help you to take care of those abscesses? How can I help you to take care of those wounds? Would it be beneficial to you if I provided you with a sterile syringe? So therefore, you can mitigate the negative consequences of any type of adverse actions from using the illicit drugs that you're using. Harm reduction basically meets people where they're at, be it if it's in the street or at the front of their door, or just in the mental state of mind or place of being where they're at in that particular moment, where basically we're not going to pressure, we're not going to compel them, we're not going to let our way of proceeding forward be their way of proceeding forward. Their pathway and their direction is their own. Now, here's the turnaround as to where society comes to this whole thing and where it becomes problematic. Everything as it pertains to quote unquote, substance use disorder typically comes with some form of a stigma or people maintaining or presenting some form of judgment towards someone. The core belief, the core essence of what harm reduction exists with and exists under is the fact that we're going to move forward without that stigma. We need to move forward with some level of compassion. We need to move forward without holding people in judgment. So, is this a better means? Is this a more viable means? Let's go back to the number that I gave before. 100,000 lives lost. 100,000 lives lost. Now, let me talk about me, because ultimately in the end, Hannah gave like a brief introduction of what I did and what I do. Typically, I'm accustomed to going before audiences that are not as astute as yourself. That basically you guys are on college campuses, there are bright lights in front of you. Oftentimes, I'm talking with people that are living through very, very much more. Their situation is very closed at this time. It could be people that are incarcerated, or people that are law enforcement people that have very, very closed ideas about how we need to move forward in this particular direction. So oftentimes the question comes up, well, why am I involved in this particular scenario? Okay, my past, I'm a retired detective sergeant from New York City Police Department. My last 3 years in the department, I supervised narcotics module. So in essence, what I did was, I did everything that I don't believe in right now. In essence, what I did was I locked up people on a day-to-day basis for using crack cocaine, heroin, any form of pills, tablets, and most importantly, as a bitter point of like just ultimate disappointment that I have to live with every single day, I arrested people for weed. So when I leave with one of my 5 W's and I talk about, well, what do I do? Well, what I do at this particular point is right now is I am a poster child of what changing the paradigm is. My paradigm shift came as a result of everything that took place on September 11th, 2001. Basically, I was a first responder down to ground zero. I was at ground zero security for about a month directly after the incident with the planes coming into the towers. I did ground zero security, wearing Tyvek suits, hard hats, masks, with police paraphernalia and police uniform underneath. Digging voluntarily for 4 hours a day while mandated to work 12 hours a day, so a total of 16-hour shifts. Somewhere at some particular point, I spent some time at the morgue, and then I was shifted to a location called Richmond County, which is Staten Island, New York. And in Staten Island, New York, there was a landfill where all the debris was being brought. So if you could just picture for 1 second having a moment where you're like, just visualize anything you've ever seen about the moon. Everything being gray with craters, it's dark, it's a black sky because it's 2:30 in the morning. And I can remember taking my double canister mask up and I sat in a bucket. And I started thinking for 1 second and saying, wow, what's going on with what I do? Back to the what I do. And what I was doing was I was living in a specter of death in my city where people were afraid to go through bridges and tunnels, where people were afraid to walk down the street without looking at waiting for another train to come by. But my day-to-day work existence consisted of basically impacting their lives, taking away their freedom. Now, I would be lying if I told you that the seed that was planted at that particular moment, for the person that just rented their kid from Staten Island, just so you know, was the Fresh Killers landfill site where the debris was being taken to, And I realized at that particular moment, the way I was impacting lives, that basically a seed wasn't immediately planted, but basically 10 years after the fact, when someone came up to me and said, hey, how would you like to be involved in a conversation when you talk to law enforcement people about the criminalization of syringes? I said, hey, could this be my opportunity to kind of like make up for my ill-gotten deeds? And I said to myself, hey, let me do this. This is something that I can enjoy doing. Was it received? In other words, now, so when we talk about the win of my W's, let's go back about 10 years. How is this thing received, this conversation? Because I don't want you to think that you can now go out amongst other people on your campus and you can engage them with this conversation and that there's going to be this ready acceptance. One of the prime principles of harm reduction is this thing called incremental change. Incremental change just simply means that we could have a situation where I'm using heroin today, but I'm homeless. Tomorrow I'm using heroin, but I found an apartment. My well-being, my life, my quality of life has actually exponentially gone up. It's a lesser chance of chaotic drug use, and therefore things have gotten better for me. So the real truth about it is that this incremental change is saying, we're not expecting you to get this whole thing captured and done in one sitting, in one set. We're not going to hold you to this notion that it needs to be fixed in this moment, if in fact it gets fixed. In fact, what we want to do is we want to continue to do the right thing and mitigate risk while we determine if in fact it will get fixed the way society thinks things need to get fixed. So ultimately, in the end, incremental change applies to the other end also. Incremental change applies to the layperson that doesn't accept any of this. It doesn't accept this notion of decriminalization of syringes, or something that may pertain to you is an understanding of the administration of naloxone Narcan, or something which should be very, very significant to you on a college campus, a clear understanding, and this is going to be your homework. I was going to bring this up in the Q&A, but I'll bring this up now. What I want you to explore is whatever the statutes are in your particular state as it pertains to 911 Good Samaritan statutes. 911 Good Samaritan statutes are what would allow you to make a phone call, a good faith, earnest phone call, and be basically indemnified from any type of prosecution if someone was in fact overdosing, which means that protection goes out to the person that's overdosing and protection will go out to you also. This statute was solely created as a means of giving protection and giving help and assistance to people in the event of an overdose, so people could feel comfortable calling. I have too many people that I know, too many people I'm familiar with, too many people that I've personally worked with that have had either children or relatives that have been left in bathtubs, stairwells, hotel rooms, closets, other places simply because someone didn't want to make a phone call. This is tragic. This goes back to the 100,000 lives. This goes back to the why. Why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because basically we're looking to create an alternate pathway to saving lives. Is there a point of readiness where someone is basically willing to take a 12-step approach and saying abstinence is the measure that I need at this particular moment? No, not necessarily, not all the time. And in those instances, the question needs to be, what compassionate thing we can do? What is the right thing that we can do as a means of basically keeping someone stable and upright until they find a way to be that way on their own? So now we can look at other things that basically people incrementally have trouble dealing with on a harm reduction level. And one of those would be something like syringe service programs. Syringe service programs allow basically the even exchange, one use for one sterile syringe. I have 5 use. I can get 5 sterile syringes. The beauty of syringe service programs is something that people at this point shouldn't even be questioning. If and when the time comes, when you're confronted by those that say, oh, you heard this thing about harm reduction and how does it help me? Or how does it move forward? How does it move the train forward? Well, let me just give you some basic numbers of syringe service programs. In municipalities where there are syringe service programs, HIV transmission rates go down by 80%. Hepatitis C transmission rates go down by 50%. It shows that crime actually goes down by 11% by studies that have been done. Syringe service programs are showing that there's a 90% reported proper disposal and return of syringes versus syringes that would have been left in the church playground or in the school parking lot. So basically, syringes go out, they come back improperly. But here's the big one, and this is the one that would probably satisfy a lot of people that believe in more of a conventional, traditional pathway of treatment, which would be abstinence. Syringe service programs, there is a 5-time greater likelihood that participants that are members of such will find their way to treatment options. So it's almost like me saying to my brother, hey, look, I know you've been using Oxy on a regular basis. The real truth about it is that I need to get you into that program because you'll have a better chance of finding treatment options in the end if you go through this program versus not going through this program. And this is something that people have trouble getting their head wrapped around. But just to share some information with you, I just did a conversation, a talk with a whole bunch of like law enforcement and politicians in a very, very rural county in Tennessee. And the real truth about it, it was like negative strike, negative strike, negative strike. We don't like this, we don't like this. So basically, and that was in the first day. And then we just continued the conversation. And some people said, well, some of these numbers and some of the things make good practical sense. But the real truth about it is ultimately in the end, what the lay person, when I say the lay person, people of the community, what they desire is they desire to see people move towards some means of treatment, some measure of treatment or recovery options. So the real truth about it is you hear 5-time greater likelihood, and then they say, it may not be such a crazy thing. And then this leads to other things that all falls within a harm reduction sphere, like something as simple as MAT, medicated assisted treatment. Well, the real truth about it is, if we are in fact taking or using illicit drugs, which one could theoretically say, depending on how we acquire them or by what means our supply line has been tainted or the way it's constructed, basically, can we do something safer? If in fact we chose that we wanted to do something more humane than basic overall abstinence withdrawal. Well, hence medicated assisted treatment or MOUD, medications for opioid use disorder. The real truth about it is these are medications, be it buprenorphine, naltrexone, or methadone, that have been approved by the FDA as being safe as a means to basically treat or move forward recovery options. Now, is it the drug itself? Because I know you're going to probably have friends going to say, looking at MAT, I don't know, I'm swapping one for another. Well, we're swapping what has been deemed as a safe drug versus a drug that may be illicit, that may not necessarily be safe. And furthermore, MAT doesn't work independently by just drug use or drug swapping. MAT is a program which stands on this notion of it needs to be accompanied with behavioral therapies, counseling, psychosocial assessments, things basically to determine, well, where exactly are we finding triggers that will lend itself more so to further drug use? So these, once again, I want to present them just solely as alternative pathways, different opportunities. And those are the conventional words for me. I just like saying these are the Kobayashi Maru. This is basically just saying we want a winnable scenario that's going to do something as a means of basically greater serving the overall community and saving lives. Now, I want to close and I'm going to like just leave some things open to you, but I want it to be very, very clear as to like really, well, what is these overall principles of harm reduction? Because I don't want to be confused, because I don't want you to run away and think, well, this is another one of these very, very progressive liberal things that's unhinged. When I say to you that basically harm reduction was around well before, well, basically it just simply means that somewhere 20 years ago, if someone was using a syringe, there may have been someone available to provide someone with a safe syringe, therefore harm reduction. Or someone overdosed 10 years ago before any and everyone had naloxone. Someone had Narcan available to them, they gave it to that person, harm reduction. All right. Someone basically at some particular point in time made an agreement with some small municipality where they weren't going to be incarcerating and arresting people and proceeding with an approach that does not work. They made an agreement with this small municipality that, hey, look, if we make a phone call to get someone help, can you please move forward, and basically not doing anything adverse to that person? That's the 911 Good Samaritan call. That's harm reduction. There's one other thing I should mention this also. There's a program, and this is a law enforcement program, so you may not really care much about it, but I think it's something you need to know about, because it's one of those things that on a very, very national level is one of these things that people are putting their hands in. They really want to put their meat into figuring out, well, how can we make this work? For those of you that are into some form of social justice and just basically overall racial equity and racial equality in the criminal justice system, this may be of interest to you. There's a program which is called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion is a program which is specifically geared around basically saying, we want to divert people away, not from substance use disorder, but we want to divert them away from the criminal justice system. So assuming that someone basically has minimal criminal background, no felonies, nothing serious, whatever it is, upon being arrested, rather than being booked and arraigned, so this is all pre-booking, pre-arraignment, everything is official, and everything is well known against, with an equal stakeholder entity. So in other words, judges know, DAs know, faith-based leaders know, commerce leaders know. Everyone is a part of this program. As equal stakeholders, that person will enter a program called LEAD, where they will receive case management services. It could be housing placement. They'll have a case manager that could do food assistance if need be, education, job placement, and more importantly, when the time is right and they're ready, treatment options. Once again, harm reduction is at its core, because while they exist in this program and they receive these wraparound case management services, they're not going to be required to basically say, you need to abstain from drug use. So there is a way, there is a means of basically like just moving forward. Understand, I don't want you to think that harm reduction is an irresponsible thing that's out there. So harm reduction realizes that, there are dangers to illicit drug use, and that basically the sole objective is not to say yay or nay, but basically to say we want to mitigate those risks. Like I previously mentioned, harm reduction acknowledges that cessation, in other words, someone basically stopping the use of drugs, is not a fair way to measure a policy or to measure a program. So in other words, a program sets itself up and basically says we are only successful if a person stops using drugs. I used an example a little bit earlier about basically what would be chaotic drug use is exponential when people are homeless. So theoretically, one way to address this situation is to find a place for them to live. Well, the real truth about it is you didn't stop the drug use, but you increased the policy itself by finding them a home, increase their overall quality of life. PWDs, PWDs, people who use drugs. Harm reduction realizes that they should have a voice in all programs, everything that goes on. Oftentimes, as harm reduction and other programs are starting up, you're going to find that cerebral components, cerebral elements, cerebral academic institutions, public health institutions, mental behavioral health institutions, law enforcement agencies, criminal justice agencies, political entities. I'll go so far with this program that Biden has, where he wants to basically $30 million going out to like just nonprofits as a means of distributing crack pipe kits and the like, so on and so forth. Everyone wants to have their piece. Ultimately, in the end, people that need to have the ultimate piece are people that use drugs. They have a deeper understanding of what is going on, what is happening, and how their lives are being impacted. It's really, really important. And this one is kind of important. It's also important that harm reduction realizes that drug use moves along a very, very complex continuum, which means that it could be anything from how you handle a situation from abstinence all the way out to actually just teaching someone how to use drugs more safely. I can recall basically, and oftentimes when I appeared at places, it was a little bit of an anomaly because they don't call me Ron or call me Martin. They just call me sometimes the cop. And, oftentimes I'll go to like events and I'll go to panels because I'm fascinated and I want to help. So one of the panels I went to was basically how to inject opioids safely. And it triggered an interesting like visual response from various people. But the real truth about it is that is part of the continuum. It goes from abstinence to how can we do this safer so we can mitigate the risk and basically, once again, save lives. Harm reduction basically understands that there are different facets of trauma, race relations, gender discrimination, people that are basically suffering from things that impacts their overall vulnerability and their capacity to deal with the use and the harm of drugs. Now, typically, this is something I tend to emphasize when I'm talking to law enforcement community officers, simply because I want to let them know people that you have in front of you have their own history, their own past, their own way of needing to move forward. And basically, you need to understand that things that have happened to them may be impacting as to what they're doing at this particular moment in their life. Now, on a very, very positive note, I kind of want to say that we're in a place where basically there seems to be an understanding amongst many, not amongst all. And this is why we continually need to voice this conversation, have this conversation. But there seems to be an agreement amongst many that there is a willingness to do things a little bit differently. There's an acceptance from people that understand 6 degrees of separation, that everyone has loved ones or friends or people that they know that basically have been put off, or separated through stigma or judgment, and has done nothing but just basically compound the situation and the trauma that they're existing with as it pertains to substance use disorder. So there seems to be a coming together of people as a whole, where basically there seems to be programs that are starting in, a willingness for people to do things a little bit differently and see things differently. And once again, this is still while maintaining a traditional pathway of treatment and recovery through abstinence, but this being an alternative one. I've oftentimes used a it's probably a poor metaphor, but it tends to work well with certain groups. So I apologize if this just seems off base, but oftentimes I think of it like there's a pool and this and that. And if there's a pool, and the pool at this particular time has people that are in the pool that are going through a lot of distress from being in the particular pool. Ultimately, in the end, society's objective is going to be, well, let's try not to let too many other people in the pool. All right, how do we keep people from getting into the pool? So we can look at that from prescription monitoring to different types of educational and training techniques to creating things called crisis intervention teams, which are programs for law enforcement so they understand to be more compassionate to everyone that they're dealing with in the community. But the real truth about it is if you're in the pool and everybody ran away from the pool and said, we're not going to be concerned with people that are in the pool, then people are going to start to drown and we're going to start to lose lives. So the question is how can we maintain a balance where we can keep people upright while they're in the pool and basically do the things that we need to do to keep them safe until we can effectively find a way to get them out of the pool. Okay, I want to take a few questions, but I just want to read one last thing to you, if I can. And this is from another song, another movie. And this is from the I think it was called The Greatest Showman. And I was just taken by the lyrics. And this one goes, and I know that I deserve your love. There's nothing I'm not worthy of. When the sharpest words want to cut me down, I'm going to send a flood, going to drown them out. This is brave. This is bruised. This is who I am meant to be. This is me. Look out, because here I come. Look out, because here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. Whenever the words want to cut me down, I'll send the flood to drown them out. I'm going to send the flood, going to drown them out. This is me. Hey guys, if I can leave you with anything of where harm reduction, it settles this tree, where it puts its roots in, is this whole notion of we need to move forward with a different level of compassion, a different level of where we minimize stigma, a different point where we don't judge people by every judgment that they make. Now, somewhere along the way, I'm going to tell you that where we need people to look into a circle with those particular lenses, we also need people in that circle itself to basically love themselves accordingly and to feel that love. This is who we are. Don't let anyone minimize you for it. This is where harm reduction incorporates basically a process of trying to build people up and understanding who you are, and let that overall self-analysis of what you're doing, how you're living your life, be your ultimate truth. And that proves to be a lot more important, a lot more beneficial to overall steps you're going to take in the future towards any type of like long-term overall recovery. Okay. Now, I got a couple of things I can answer up that Matt threw at me earlier, or if you got anything, I'm going to say it the way I would do in New York style. Holler at me. Let me hear it. Let me hear something good, anything.
Hey, Ron, we've got a question from Maggie. She says, I worked in a bar that had safe needle drops in the bathroom, and I thought it was amazing. But now that I've left the service industry, I feel like I don't get to suggest that to other places. How can we approach businesses as a consumer to suggest these options?
Maggie, this is going to be a simplistic way of answering this question, so don't get mad at me if you don't like the way this comes across. I'm going to say once again, I'm going to use me as an example. I am a cop, an ex-cop that pushes a very, very progressively left means of saying, this is the way we need to proceed forward. And the only thing I can push it forward with, or drive the train with, is my voice. Oftentimes I can say to people like, well, how and the what's and whatever it is, so on and so forth. It typically starts with like a question. It starts with a question. It starts with the opportunity to find a champion, someone that basically sees things the way you see, that's willing to move things forward. And from there, a statute, or for any restaurateur, just a recommendation. Hey, look, this is a problem we have in our community. Would you be willing? And basically just taking the independent steps to just move forward and just make this something that you want it to be. Just to just go as an aside to something else. With everything that I spoke about, I have my own personal baby. And one of my personal babies is these 911 Good Samaritan statutes. 911 Good Samaritan statutes are different throughout the country. In some states, they will basically say, well, the drug user and the caller are immune from prosecution. But in other states, they'll say, you get to pick 3 people to get to go free. Everybody else gets arrested. So we're in a dormitory room with 5 friends. If my friends stay, most of them are getting arrested. Some get to go free and some don't. My personal baby, or my voice in that instance, is just like yours would be that of drop boxes for syringes. My voice is that of, we got to secure these. We got to secure that statute on a national level. So basically everyone can feel free to basically say, I want to make this phone call. You could be the voice that basically makes it so, just by starting, by inquiring, to make it so where people understand it's not a bad thing. It's not a stigmatized thing if we have a drop box location in a restaurant, in a bathroom, wherever. See you, Randy. Thank you.
All right. Robin says, hey, Ron, I'm working on getting Narcan approved for resident advisors in the dorms at UNCG.
Hey,
Do you
cool.
have any advice?
You need to make sure you get my personal information. you're in my home. You're in my home state. So Robin, I would love to just put you in touch with certain people that could possibly put the Narcan in your hands, or maybe can get some for you and actually just jumpstart that program a little bit. Or some people that are actually working as our Narcan outreach team as a means of how to initiate this particular program. Look, here's what I can tell you though, and this may be a point of confidence for you to move with. Out of everything I spoke about, and understand where I'm coming with this, I maybe should have expanded upon this just a little bit. I oftentimes refer to law enforcement communities as the ultimate triage. In other words, they are the first responders to a lot of these episodes. And I put the responsibility on them to be compassionate on that level of understanding that you are the first response team. So therefore you have this responsibility to the community to do correctly. Now, with that being said and done, when it comes to paraphernalia, when it comes to needles and syringes, when it comes to syringe service programs, when it comes to law enforcement assisted diversion, all these programs, law enforcement tends to move a little bit slower. What I can tell you seems to be widely accepted out there is the administration of Narcan. So basically, theoretically, once again, just being willing to promote the conversation on the campus of Greensboro it will open up doors and can open up windows because people already see Narcan is a sensible thing to have on hand. Where every single floor residence director needs to have it, or every single dormitory needs to have access to it, or whatever it is. The time window is maybe what, 3-4 minutes. We need to really be administering it. And to be very honest, when you use communication techniques with various institutions and agencies, it's very, very simple. When you go into a meeting, you say, hey, look, these are the numbers. 93,000 people in 2020, 100,000 people over the last 12 months. We don't necessarily need this happening on our campus. This is what we can do. It's a common sense thing. And most people afford it at this point.
Nick says, what was the turning point or specific event for you with regard to addiction, the importance of harm reduction?
Nick, really, I mean, I can get into the whole thing and talk about Charlie and Vanetta. That's my mother and father and how they raised me. And I think that they raised me with a decent heart and everything else. I can also tell you that please do not look me up or sum me up as being one of those guys that basically was unjust or illegal or misconduct. No, I was one of those. Hey, I was a Life Scout in the Boy Scouts. I was deprived of my Eagle badge because I got sick and couldn't get the merit badge done in time. I was one of those guys. I believe in right and wrong, but I believe in fairness and compassion towards people and love towards people. I think ultimately in the end, I think when I started to take a look at this and realizing that how debilitating the road of law enforcement was, going down a pathway where they weren't willing to get past traditional ways of engaging the war on crime, it just really just woke me up to the fact that, hey, not only are they putting themselves at risk, but they're doing nothing to benefit the community. And somewhere along the way, I can say I can make up that necessary distance of making a comeback to basically say, hey, look, this is what needs to be done. When they came to me and said, well, why do I want to do that? Why do I care? Why do I care about people in recovery? Why do I care about people using drugs? It's their choice. It's their judgment. We're just enabling them. And then basically, I wasn't afraid to ask the question, why? So to say where the actual turn took place, I go back to September 11th and basically say, look, I realize the difference between life and death. And I asked myself the general question, how do I want to impact lives? 10 years later, God, willing, I was given the opportunity to basically give the opportunity to go before people and speak to them about these things.
All right. It looks like we have
Matt, you're breaking up just a little bit. Okay, Matt was breaking up. I can't tell if you guys can hear. Say it again, Matt.
Hey, Matt, I think you're breaking it up.
All right, let me just look. I know there's like about maybe 6 minutes.
Hey, Terry, Ron, I have the question that Matt was going to read off.
Okay, sure.
It's in the chat box. So Terry is wondering, how do you propose setting the stage for those who have the ability to implement harm reduction tools in a space when they have not yet had that shift of thinking, such as Narcan facilities? Just very, like, what are the first steps?
I mean, and I'm going to oversimplify this for a second, but if I'm not mistaken, pretty much everyone here is involved by some means, somehow, some way on a college campus, which by its definition is some form of an educational institution. This is all about education, guys. This is really what this is. This is about basically getting people to understand the concepts, the things. This could be like a simple word of mouth. I challenge every single one of you. I'm going to go to Lady Mormont, and I'm not going to get into a long story. She was my favorite character from the Game of Thrones. It was a very, very small 10-year-old woman that led this place called Bear Island. And there was this one scene towards the end of Game of Thrones where they were declaring Jon Snow was the king of the North. And she challenged all of these other mighty knights and said, Sir Singletary, I understand that the battle of such and such, you refused to come, you refused to call. And then she challenged another knight and said, Sir such and such, you refused to call to come to fight this particular battle. And then she says, but we didn't refuse to call. In other words, I'm just simply saying, this is the moment that we stand in. And the moment that we stand in where right now is where, in not refusing the call, the greatest tool is going to be your voice. So my challenge tomorrow to everyone that's participating this here is just to create a conversation. It doesn't have to be a hard conversation. It could be a soft conversation. Let the conversation be, I heard someone talk about something called harm reduction last night. It's a little different. And just see what it promotes. And what I'm going to just try to say to you is that basically, this is where it all starts from. This is literally where it all starts from. Inquiring how people feel about different things. And then ultimately, the next thing you know, it leads to basically people saying, well, we need more of that here. And therefore, we can now move forward with this program. The Tennessee thing that I made reference to, when I say a very conservative county, very conservative county, they wanted no change. They listened a little bit and they heard pieces, just heard it from a different perspective about syringe service programs. And now they're on the verge of implementing their first countywide syringe service program. This is change comes through voicing and articulating our desires and passions.
That's great. I'm not sure if Matt is back online, but I know there is a question that we had kind of formulated earlier on, which I know probably a lot of students might have a similar question, but historically speaking, a lot of collegiate recovery communities, so recovery communities on college campuses, have been abstinence-based. So what would you say for folks who say that harm reduction promotion on campus is triggering to them and their recovery?
Here's what I'm going to say, and you're going to get like a different viewpoint about this from different people depending on who you ask this question to. Hannah, what I'm going to say though is harm reduction is just, for me, my understanding is that it is a pathway. It is one of many different types of alternative opportunities as a means of basically saying, can we help keep people alive? So ultimately in the end, I understand that a more traditional abstinence-based pathway of recovery is accepted. It's going to be greatly accepted amongst most of the lay individual communities around our country, so on and so forth. And I understand that, and I applaud it, and I accept it. But for those that aren't ready for it, for those that aren't ready in that particular moment, for those people that we do need to meet them where they are in that particular moment, basically what we're doing is what you convey to your friend is you can even, this is a technique, unfortunately, I hate to pull this out, this is a sales technique, but one of the techniques is called what is called a pace lead. You can say to the person, hey, look, I agree with what you're saying. I do understand it could be a little problematic, so on and so forth, but it is a means of basically mitigating the risk of someone that isn't ready to stop at this particular moment. It's a means of basically saving someone's life if in fact they're not ready to proceed forward with the traditional means. So you need to present, it needs to be presented as an alternative. And the ultimate alternative and objective is to save people's lives. Thank you, Carly, appreciate it.
That's a great answer. And I think that just gives students something very tangible that they can respond to when they come up against that. I think we have room for one more quick question and then we'll close out for the evening. You kind of touched on this throughout your presentation, but I think one of the biggest hurdles that folks face when they start talking to people about harm reduction, even in the most basic forms, that they immediately are up against folks who say, well, harm reduction is just promoting drug use. So, and that's not, we don't want to be about that. So what would you say to folks who are in the beginning stages of talking about this with campus staff and administrators, and that's what their response is?
Listen, and it comes back, and I feel really, really bad when I feel like I'm recycling the same answer over and over again. But unfortunately, there are instances where this may be the core of really what just needs to be hammered in. And I want to say it with some resonance in my voice, just a little bit. So I'm going straight baby boomer bass right now, okay? But 100,000 lives, 100,000 people. So the question is what can we do to do the right thing to help to keep some of them alive? All right, so now, if the answer is basically, well, we could put them in jail, is that a viable answer? No. can we basically just say, as a very, very conservative person in the audience said to me one day, can we just basically dig a hole and put them in the grave? That's not a viable solution. So ultimately, in the end, how do we meet people at a place before they're actually ready to do something? And one of the ways in which we can do it is basically by saying, look, I may not necessarily agree with what you're doing. I may not necessarily believe that it's the best approach, but it is the approach that in this particular moment, you can find a personal standing with yourself, where basically you can find a directional route out, a directional pathway out from where you're at right now, but stay well. Have your wellness effectively work for you while you're trying to find that way out. Ultimately, in the end, I think somewhere along the way, the thing that we need to just grasp up, there's a Stevie Wonder song, which basically, it goes a little bit more to my political conversations and political discourse nowadays, but there's a song which is called Love is in Need of Love. And basically the lyrics go, love is in need of love today. And everybody needs to just really listen to that. That's pretty much kind of sort of where we're at right now. We just need to find a way to just create a deeper sensation of overall benefit to folks, and assume that everything that we have in place right now at this moment isn't the only way to effectively deal with things. Not that it's a wrong thing, but it's not the only way. And that's the traditional means of abstinence.
That's great. Ron, I gotta say, I love all of your song lyrics. That first one with the rent lyrics, I was like singing along in my head. It's really awesome. All right.
Lena, I appreciated the information about Denver, by the way, Lena. Thank you.
We are at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and end the webinar for the evening. Just some housekeeping things. I did include the links that I promised everybody at the beginning of the webinar. So if you're not familiar with Safe Project and the work that we do, that first link brings you to our website, and you can look through all of our initiatives. We don't just work on collegiate campuses. We have 3 other main initiatives that we work with as well. And then also, because this webinar was designed specifically for our Leadership Academy students, I also put a link in there for our Collegiate Recovery Leadership Academy. There's contact information on our website. If anybody has any questions or wants follow-up information or Ron's contact information, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, Hannah, that's all I was going to say. Hey, guys, listen, anything comes up, any questions, anything that's all, I forgot the name of the person, I should have wrote down. University of Greensboro, really, seriously, contact me, phone, email, reach out to me. Seriously, this is like, I'm gonna tell you a little secret. When you get older, you find those lifelong passions. Hey, look, this is something that I'm doing till I'm done and I'm out of here. I would like to know that everyone is going to be in that good, great, wonderful place also. We can keep people healthy and safe. So, please reach out to me with anything you have.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. So we'll be following up with the recording to this webinar. Like if Ron's cool with it, I'll also include Ron's contact information if anybody has follow-up information or wants to get in touch with him. But thank you everybody for joining. This was the first webinar in our webinar series. We have 4 more, so stay tuned for links to register for those. Thanks, everybody.